Private education, where do you stand? Are you someone who's currently private educating your kids or who has aspirations to do it? Or are you on the other camp where you're saying to yourself, no way am I going anywhere near private education? We want to just unpack this topic today, didn't we?
Absolutely. We both have our views and, it's interesting to hear from you guys. We put a poll out in our community on YouTube and Instagram, and the results were quite varied, weren't they? You had some people saying they were for it and some not so. So yeah, we're just going to talk about our experiences, our views, and just share with you our learning so far.
Yeah, so we'll cover pros and cons basically, and share. Mary and I have personal experiences, like she said. But more specifically, the reason we wanted to talk about this is because we've had many people saying to us, what do you guys think about private education? What's your personal view? Are you going to make a video about this?
This has been highly requested. I don't know why I've been reluctant to do it, but yeah, we decided today's the day to do it, right?
Yeah.
And here it is, guys.
And in addition to that, we've noticed trends as well. So a lot of people from our background, by that I mean like Africans and people with immigrant backgrounds, there's a big kind of default towards private education. And we wanted to just talk about that. We can understand the motivation, but it's also worth talking about because a lot of people tend to go into it without really understanding the core why they're doing it. It's almost, there's a lot of peer pressure. And even in some cases, a lot of people are not saving for their retirement, or they're not saving enough for retirement, and they're prioritizing private education for their children. And of course, as a personal finance channel, it has a knock-on effect on the journey towards financial independence as well.
Absolutely.
Guys, if you're enjoying this particular topic, come on, hit the like button. This is such an important topic. Give us that signal that you are enjoying the topic of today's video. All right, so let's set the scene, right? Let's talk about our personal situation. So first of all, it's worth mentioning that Mary and I are not privately educated. Okay, that's really worth mentioning. A lot of you will know that I talk a lot about my journey to this country. So I went to school in Nigeria up until the age of about 14. And I'm still on a WhatsApp group with a bunch of guys who used to be in the same class as me.
Tell them how many people in a WhatsApp group, babe.
There are currently 61 people in the WhatsApp group. Remember, that WhatsApp group is just for my class only, not for the whole year, just for the class. And I asked in the group, just kind of people to remind me how many people on average you had in the class. And people said, on average, at the height, it was at around 95 children per class.
That's just crazy.
95,
wow.
Okay. Now I'm mentioning that because this is very relevant for this conversation. Because in this country we talk a lot about class sizes and for good reason. And the only reason I was able to thrive in that environment was because, like, for a boys' school, highly kind of energetic and so on, I was only able to thrive because, like, I was just geeky. Like, I geeked out on wanting to be top 5 in my class. And that was my reason for living at that stage of my life, right? But what about you? What about your schooling experience?
Yeah, so the class sizes were not that big. It was a normal 30 children in a classroom, but my school was in I went to school in Hackney. It was a lot of the children who went to the school were from council estates. A lot of the time, the situation was that we had supply teachers because our teachers were calling in sick all the time. You had disruptive children who were always kicked out of the classroom. Like Ken, I also liked to, I wouldn't say I was a geek, but I just loved to, I was very competitive, always had to finish my work on time. So all I was ever given was extension work. I was never ever really pushed.
You were not challenged.
I was not challenged. And even at a young age, I knew I wasn't challenged. I knew that the teachers weren't really they didn't really feel it. They weren't really enjoying their profession. In fact, I was telling Ken that the kind of school that I was at, my dad would tell the teachers, during parents' evening, let me know if my daughter misbehaves, I would discipline her. But there were parents who would come to the school to challenge the teachers. My child told me that you told them off, don't discipline my child. That's the kind of school that I went to. It was an interesting dynamic.
When I moved to this country, age 14, going on 15, I then went into year 11. Worst possible time to join a school, complete bullying, completely being pushed around all the time, just struggling to fit in, all that stuff.
You arrived to this country when you were how old?
14 going on 15.
14.
Yeah, so worst time really to try and fit into school. So we say that just kind of set the scene of kind of our personal background and how our schooling has gone. But for our children, we decided 5 years ago, about 5 years now, that our children should go to a private primary school. And we're going to tell you why we decided that. And we decided to do that, but in addition, we decided that our children would love for them to go to a state secondary school. Okay, so that's just setting the scene. So why did we decide to go to a private primary school? We decided to do that for a bunch of reasons. But before I even go into that, I wanted to say that before we did that, we were trying to get into one of those church schools.
Yes,
right?
So go on, do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, we were trying to get into one of those church schools because, the local one's a Catholic school. And we started attending the services and stuff like that. But there was just something really, really wrong about it.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. It just felt really wrong because Mary and I are not practicing Catholics or anything.
Although you were baptised.
Yeah. I was baptised Catholic. We're Christians, but we're not practicing Catholics or anything like that. So it just felt weird doing that, trying to get into a school, kind of going through that whole system like everybody did. We knew everybody in that church was actually faking it, basically, trying to get their kids into the school. But we just couldn't carry on with that. We just thought, nah, that's not on. So we let go of that. We've been saving some money with the optionality of like, what if our child doesn't get into a good primary school, what should we do? So this is part of what motivated us. And then obviously when we applied for primary schooling, we got nowhere near the school we wanted locally. In fact, the primary schools near where we live are not very good, but the secondary schools are excellent.
We've had our experiences at school and we just wanted a better experience and opportunities for our children. So that was definitely a deciding factor as well.
Yeah, another point really worth making here is the postcode, almost lottery system that exists in the education system here, I guess in the UK. Yeah, in that, where your child goes to school is really driven by either where you live, so you've got you've got good schools and you've got not so good schools, and the good schools tend to be in really expensive areas.
Yeah.
Okay, worth mentioning that. So for Mary and I, what we decided to do almost 10 years ago was when we bought our house, we decided that we would buy the house in an area with access to good secondary schools, right? That's one thing we did.
Yeah.
And so within a stone throw, we are very close to various grammar schools, or within like maybe a 2-mile radius. And doing that meant that we paid a premium for the house we lived in, right?
That's right.
And the reason I bring that up is that in this almost debate about private school versus state school, one element that lots of people don't talk about is the price that people pay for their homes. Because you have people who argue and say, well, actually, and we're going to go into pros and cons very shortly, by the way. You can have people who say, well, actually, I don't want my child to pay for private school, but yet they go and they buy and pay quite a lot of money for an expensive part of town
to try and get their child into a very good
school,
which a lot of people cannot do that either.
Yeah. So, but a lot of people do. In that that's their way of getting their child into a really good school. So you don't have this almost, this dual thing going on where it's either you're paying or you buy a really expensive house, or you don't do any of those things and you go to you go to a state school altogether. Okay, but either way, there are those options that exist.
There are. Ken and I decided, private education was right for our children. And although we did a lot of research beforehand, and by that we spoke to a lot of parents whose children had attended the private school and also were still at the private school, we still didn't really 100% know what we were getting ourselves into. And we're going to talk about that now.
Yeah, pros and cons.
Right, so first pro of private education is class sizes. So as a lot of people know, private schools have a small class size, which could be from around 10 to 20 children. Whereas in state schools, the class size could be up to 30 children. And if your child is in a class with children who are, like when I was growing up in school, very disruptive or very loud, or they misbehave, then it's very easy for your child to fall behind in their education, maybe because they're quiet, they're timid, or they're just not able to thrive in a situation where other children are not working hard too. So there are some knock-on effects of being in a class size that is very big, and especially if the children in that class are not behaving or they're not studious. Yeah,
so our children are in a class size of between 15 and 20 children. It just varies depending on what's going on at school. And that class size, I think the beauty of it, we've seen personally, is that the teachers know them very personally, and like they actually get a lot of attention one-to-one. Okay, and that matters a lot. And as Mary mentioned, like when I went to school in Lagos and with like up to 95 people in my class, like there was no way the teacher could remember anyone's names really. The teacher probably remembered maybe the top 5 kids or top 10 kids or maybe the troublemakers in the class.
Not the ones in the middle.
Yeah, not the ones in the middle. Do you understand? So it meant that there were lots of children who didn't experience, you know, the good, you know, a decent quality of education.
Yeah.
And in the same way, even when I went to secondary school here, you know, there were definitely the kids who were known. In fact, the troublesome kids were known more by the teachers than the kids like me who was like, all about my double science, and I get my double A, you know, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
So the teachers knew me, you know, but there were lots of children in between that just did not get the attention as well. We're not necessarily saying that, you know, like a small class size is all you have to focus on. What we're really saying is that knowing your child really matters as a parent. Because for some parents, they would know that their child is resilient and they can cope in a class of like 30 kids. And so they're more than happy for their kids to maybe go to a state school. And that's fine, there's nothing wrong with that. But for some other parents, they might feel, you know, that their child might not be able to cope in that environment, or that their child might have special needs, for example, or just requires special attention.
Yeah.
In which case, for them, their goal might be that they want their child to be in a smaller class size.
Yeah. Second pro is kids being challenged academically and beyond.
Yeah, this is so important, really. I mean, we, on a very personal level, we feel that we are so connected to schoolwork.
Yes.
In that, like, for us, it's almost like a triangular partnership: parent, child, and school.
It's very strong.
It's the thing that's really stood out of doing this whole private school experience. And our kids really being pushed a lot in a good way, in that they're being challenged. There's no day, and I was speaking to a friend of mine, a very close friend of mine, whose child goes to a state school outside of London. She said something like her child gets homework once every week.
Yes.
Whereas our children get 2 to 3 pieces of homework every single day, right? So whether it's like maths and English and history, or maths, English and geography, or maths, English and like science and so on, there's something every single day. And that's meant that Mary and I get involved every day without fail, because the teachers are on it in terms of like pushing the kids and making sure that they are being driven academically and as well as beyond the academics as well.
Absolutely. So like Ken said, it's not just the work that they do in school, but they do a lot at home. And because of that, we're very close to the curriculum. We know what our children are doing. And there's just this whole kind of more well-rounded learning that they're getting from school, which is being complemented at home as well.
And I wanted to add as well that challenge comes also from the kids being around other children.
Yes.
Because like if kids are around other driven children, they're more likely to be driven. That's just facts.
That's a good point, because you know the point you made about your friend who the child only gets one homework. Like parents complain. I've heard that, you know, parents whose children are in state schools, the parents complain about the amount of homework that they get. They say it's too much, kind of thing, which is understandable. But you know, where a lot of the parents, they have a lot of invested interest in the child's learning. So yes, it is very hard, but we just get on with it. We don't really. Okay, we do complain.
We do complain.
But we get it done. We're not trying to say no, don't give them so much homework. We just get on with it, because we.
If anything, we're saying actually push the kids some more. In some instances, we're saying no.
Yeah, not in terms of homework, but we are doing it willingly, because we know that it's helping the children to thrive.
Yeah.
So we're happy with it.
And I wanted to also say the point around children being around other children who are challenged is the parents. Like we've got these WhatsApp groups, and honestly, the parents are on it. Like they are on it. Like every day, what's his homework? Who's done this? What's his trip? Who's done that? When are we going to this? When is this event? Like they are on it. And that really says a lot, because like when you have motivated parents, I think that's the thing that misses a lot with schooling is parental engagement. Because when there's no parental engagement, like the kids suffer.
We're going to touch on that. We're going to touch on that in the cons. But
We'll cover that a bit. But I'd say that's a part of the pro you mentioned as well, having the motivated parents as well.
Yeah, and the strong parent and school partnership.
Yeah. All right, so the next pro is extracurricular activities and clubs. Okay, so we all know about this. These are all the things around like swimming, for example, having their own swimming pool at school, which is fantastic. Just like, oh my gosh. By the way, I didn't see a swimming pool until I moved to the UK.
Aw.
Let alone the kids having it. I think that is unbelievable.
It is. Yeah, absolutely.
Like sports and like rugby and football and violin, all these other things that exist. So that is definitely a big pro. And it's all done at school. That's the key thing.
That's the key thing.
All done at school.
Yeah.
And so by the time they come back, they can get on with other stuff
Homework.
as well.
The next pro of private education school is the excellent resources. So here we're talking great sporting grounds, equipment, computer equipment,
Yeah.
Amazing big playgrounds, computerized whiteboards, and just the amount of resources that you can see the private schools invest back into the school. The next and most important is the quality teachers, as in we could tell, we feel that the teachers actually love what they're doing. They're not like stressed out, burnt out, overworked.
They're motivated.
They're motivated.
They're paid well.
They're paid well, but also they're highly qualified. There's a kind of higher barrier to entry. It's not like, I'm just going to get a part-time job as a teacher. No, it's actually people who love their work, love their profession, and love children. And our children know that too. Like, they're always happy to go to school because children know they're smart. They know if the teacher loves what they're doing, if they're passionate, and in turn the child would then be passionate about the particular subject that the teacher is, teaching the children. So yeah.
And the teachers have longevity as well. That's worth mentioning.
Exactly.
In that they're not being swapped around every week or every 2 weeks. You've got a different teacher. You've got teachers who've been there for years.
Many years.
But saying all this though, private schools have cons. So definitely make sure you hang around. We've got, we're going to talk about the cons as well from our experience of doing this over the last 5 years.
Yeah.
All right, the next pro is network effect. So by that I just mean the fact that you get to school, and of course, you've got people who are infinitely more well off than you are, who are running really good businesses and doing really very interesting things, have very senior jobs and stuff like that. So, as parents, you get to know these people, you go to kids' parties, you get to chat and stuff, and so that network just grows. You're like, oh, I know this guy, or I know this woman, and who works here or who runs this type of business. And essentially, your network grows, and you have a much better network effect by being around those people.
Yeah. The next pro is well-balanced and happy kids. So our children are being taught some very important values, such as being aspirational, being entrepreneurial, being compassionate, being an individual, and being enlightened. And so they're always being pushed to become leaders. They're being trained to become leaders, to be articulate and good speakers. And so they often do, competitions, a lot of performances where they do individual performances and class performances, to really push them. They're being taught to be kind to each other in the environment. They're always raising money for certain charities, and it's not just chucking money at the charities, but they're very in touch with the charities that they're raising money for.
They do entrepreneurial activities to raise money.
Yes, they're always doing entrepreneurial activities, and we can't help but support it because we absolutely love to see it. Like, they come up with the business idea and then they sell, when they get to the older class, to either raise money for a trip that they're going on or for a particular charity that we've chosen. So we love everything about that.
Yeah, I think it's the intention. I think they're being it's about the leadership at the school, and this would differ by school, by the way. So Mary and I are speaking from personal experience, and it would differ by school, but it's about the intention of the leadership to try and foster a very specific culture, and by that, creates a certain value system within the children.
Exactly, and with that parent-teacher partnership, we're always in the loop. We're being told of what that is, so that we can also, I guess, practice it at home as well.
Yeah. Okay, so the next pro is confidence. Now, I mentioned this one because I've always noticed, as someone who didn't go to a private school, I've always noticed that people who went to private schools just seem to have a bit more of an edge. When it came to confidence. They felt they could get into various spaces, they could get onto various platforms, they could reach various people. Whereas I always felt kind of reserved. It wasn't until I actually went to this part, it's going to sound really weird and really shallow, but it's the truth. I'm just being very honest. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to go and do my MBA at Cambridge, was just so I could be in that environment, just kind of see what the big deal is and what it's all about, and just kind of feel I've been in that space and just experience it, And it does bring a certain level of confidence. But the thing to mention though is that this confidence isn't just something that comes from you going to a private school. Confidence can come from anywhere. It can come from being in the right environments,
Yes.
being exposed to sports or dance or, various activities that means that you become more confident, for
Exactly,
example.
totally. Just the parent really investing in a child's interests and pushing
Yes.
them, being able to be the best version of themselves. A child can get confidence from that, like you said. So it doesn't have to just be from a private school,
Yeah.
but this is just what we've noticed.
And in addition, personality plays into this as well, because some children
Personality,
or some people are just naturally more confident than other people. So again, this is not a private school specific thing, but it's something that also can be fostered, obviously, outside of a private school environment.
Okay, so pro number 8 is future opportunities. Now, some people might find this a bit controversial or unfair, but if you look at the real world today and you look at all the high positions within industries, within governments, you will see that a lot of the people who are at the top or who are leading, who have very influential and powerful roles, actually came from private schools.
Yeah, it's just a sad reality that there is that vast inequality when it comes to that. And a lot needs to happen in terms of a culture change for people not just to be picked or prioritized because they went to a private school. This is a big motivation for why Mary and I actually, funny enough, are saying to ourselves, well, actually, although they're doing private primary, we want them to do state secondary education, to go to the grammar schools, hopefully near us, if they get in. They're not guaranteed to get in. If they get in and perform well, we want that balance, and I think that balance is actually really important. And I think there's much more of a focus now on picking candidates or picking people who come from very varied backgrounds.
Very important.
Because intelligence really is about that. It's about that diversity of life experience, that diversity of being around different people, being around different situations. And to your point about being streetwise, all these things play into it. A really good example real quick was I remember when I went to try and get my CFO job, and they'd interviewed all these people who'd gone to all these private schools, who'd done all these amazing things. And I was the last guy who came in. It was 5 o'clock, all flustered. And I'm like, yeah, come in. The guy who was interviewing me was just interviewing me, and he thought, just to do it to tick a box and say he's interviewed some guy. And I was the only black candidate that came into that job. But as soon as I started talking about my life in Lagos, playing football on the streets without my shoes, just doing my thing, hustling and then doing all my various things when I moved to this country, they were just like, what? I suddenly went up to become the favorite candidate, and that was it. And that's without private education. So just worth mentioning that experience that you get from just being streetwise and so on just gives you so much more of an advantage, and that doesn't really necessarily come from private school.
Absolutely. All right, so let's talk about the cons of private education, because let's be honest, not everything is pros and roses. Okay, so con number 1, which is obvious, the costs.
Money. Yes. It costs a lot of money.
A lot.
Yeah, let's be very upfront. Literally, in our minds, for primary education, for example, you'd be looking at around £100,000 and beyond, probably per child. And then some people, carry on to secondary education and pay even more, because secondary education is even more expensive. And obviously, that cost is not just the monetary cost, there's also the opportunity cost that's connected to that, that's worth mentioning. So it's something that Mary and I are very, very aware of. And just to be very clear, the fact that Mary and I are paying for primary education is in no way us saying to you, this is what you should be doing as well. We're not saying that at all, because we're in a very different place from a money journey perspective. Okay, we're not struggling, or anything necessarily financially. We're able to do it and see what we do as an investment, as an asset class for our children, for their primary education, and our desires that they'll go on to do state secondary.
Con number 2 is that paying does not equate to success. So this point is a really, it's an interesting one, because as most of you know, I left the city and we trained to work in childcare. And so I was very close to the early years foundation stage curriculum, which is what they teach them from birth to 5. And knowing that, we've always been very on point with our children's education. We put a question out in our community, I think last year, private education. What are your thoughts? And somebody made a point like, oh, I'm not just going to chuck my child into private education and leave the school to deal with it. Like, I thought that was very interesting. There's a perception that if you send your child to private school, they will just flourish, they will thrive, you don't have to do anything. Not the fact. Like we said, there's a strong parent and school partnership. A lot of parents are shocked when they put their child in private education and then it comes to doing maybe entry exams, 11 plus exams, and their child does not pass. So we started teaching our children to read from 2, and they were able to read by the age of 3, so before they even started school. And in fact, we were actually reading to them from when they were born. Even though they didn't understand, and I thought I was being silly and dumb, like Ken would always encourage me, like, no, keep talking to them, keep reading to them. Talk to them like they're adults. It really did help with their vocabulary, being able to speak quick early and be able to read. All this to say, if you do choose to send your child to a private school, be prepared to put in a lot of work.
Correct.
Otherwise, they would really fall behind. And
the school will kick your child out.
Yes, they will. Like, you just notice like some children disappearing. Like, oh, what happened to that child?
They're not keeping up.
Yeah.
That's the truth. Let's be frank. They can't keep up. The school don't want their grades to look bad because the school rely on fantastic grades for them to say this is advertisement that our school is a place to come to. And so when they have a child who's not keeping up, that child suddenly just vanishes. It just disappears, stops coming, and they'll replace that child with somebody else who's doing well so that they can get those grades. So it's imperative for those people who are thinking about doing this that they are proper on it. Because otherwise it becomes like proper fail, because not only child does not do well, but also you've lost all your money and also you're starting all over again. That's just not the one.
So some might argue like, why am I paying so much fees to also be like, doing a little work at home? Well, that's what you pay for.
It's you're basically paying for a framework. You're paying for like a method, or you're paying for the environment, paying for all these things. A collection of experiences. You're paying for all of that. But make no mistake, at the very center, you are doing the work. Yeah.
Con number 3, and it's a big one, is not fitting in. So there's still a massive potential for your child to be in an environment where they're not in the same social class as the other children in their class. So they may be from a working class background because their parents could see the importance of education. So their parents have invested so much in sacrifice, working crazy hours, crazy hours to get their children into the best school to hopefully give their child the best future. But what happens is that the children are in schools with other children who are from very affluent, so big homes, big cars, big holidays, and the child may feel like they don't fit in.
I remember this example. One child, who we're not going to name, but was saying how like their other children getting like £500 pocket money or something silly.
Wow.
And like, it just causes these really weird dynamics where like,
pocket money.
Yeah, like money to spend on stuff.
Right.
Like some kids might have really expensive iPhone, like iPhone 30, I don't know what the latest iPhone is, but the latest iPhone, for example, and another child might not have because like their parents might not be, might not have money to buy expensive gadgets.
Yeah.
If you're gonna get into this environment, your mindset has to be really different. Like Mary and I, we drive a slightly beat up electric.
Not beat up.
Well, it's an old car. But the thing is, like we know, like we've got. We don't have an empty bank account. It's probably the better way to put it. And we're good, right? So our mindset's different. Like we kind of know, we know exactly what our game is. We know exactly what we're doing. Exactly, like we're good we're not looking for good. Oh, I want that one. Oh, I want that one. We're not interested at all. But for some people, this could be quite a big problem.
It could be a problem, yeah. And you know what? We put a simple poll out on Instagram: private education, yes or no. Somebody responded no, and then went a step further and sent us a DM. I was like, oh my gosh, please let me read this out. She went on to say, I don't think it matters where you go to school. I went to private school all my life, and my mum jokes that she spent over $1 million, i.e. 200k, on her alone.
So it's just pause. Context. This individual went to school abroad.
Yeah, abroad, exactly.
So just context. So £200,000. Okay, yep.
I would have preferred that she used it more towards her retirement. There is an unspoken debt I have to repay her because of the sacrifice of sending me to private school, and it weighs on me heavily. I had the courage at 32 to tell her how weighed down I was as a child because I knew she paid a lot of money. She even used part of her pension to pay tuition at one point, and now she is struggling, and I do my best to assist her. I work part-time in care and give her money to help her. I hated private school. I was the broke kid, and the kids were cruel, very cruel. I wore the same blazer from grade 8 to grade 12. I never went on school trips, but one that was a science fair, and that set her back financially. I could have gone to a public school and probably fared better. There is no salary structure for those of us who went to private school.
Wow, so much to unpack there, like so much, because like, you know, you can see from the mum's perspective, she's trying to get her child ahead. And this is what you notice with a lot of us immigrant parents, you know, like we're trying to get our kids ahead and stuff like that. A lot of people watching this right now would be in that position right now where they might not have a lot of money in the bank. They might not even have a pension. But they're saying to themselves, well, actually, we're behind on the curve, on the journey, but like to help our children and to kind of, you know, elevate them, we want to try and sacrifice, which on paper is a good thing. But you can see, like...
What's the child's experience? You've done all that you could, but is the child thriving in that environment? Or are they feeling so like this is not for them because they don't fit in?
She went on to say, so many parents will go broke for their children, then build wealth for themselves. She says, I may be wrong, but I think as Africans, we can relate more to I suffered. We validate our own stories and those of others who have not suffered.
And, you know, this is not, and I'm sure there are so many other people who have their own stories of how they didn't fit in. Like, we've got friends, and she, our friend went to private school where she hated it. She was bullied, and she's adamant now that her child is not going to go to private school because of her experience. But we'll touch on that as well.
And we've had friends who've said, we're definitely not taking our kids to private school. And then next you heard from them, they were now at private school. So it's a really interesting topic. And by the way, we'd love to hear from you guys in the comments. We want to hear from you guys. If you've not liked this video already, come on, what are you waiting for? Hit the like button. But don't forget to jump in there and actually comment. Let us know where you stand on this subject. And remember, we're not judging anybody. You know, this is just us having an adult, you know, adult-led conversation or an adult conversation. But let us know in the comments what you genuinely think about this from your own perspective. All right, so the next one's possible racism. Now, this will not apply to everybody, of course, but we're saying that as, let's be real, like we're a black family, and there'll be many other people watching this who are black families or families of, you know, from ethnic minority backgrounds. And being in a private school environment, you know, you tend to see that private schools are typically made up of majority white people who might be well-to-do, maybe, you know. And what you find is that there's the possibility of racism, and this is a very real possibility where you might have, you know, just one black boy in a class of, you know, white boys and girls, or just one black girl or Asian or whatever in a class of, you know, just white people, and that can create problems.
Absolutely. We had a situation where one of our really good friends, her daughter was scrubbing her skin in the bath really hard and said, like, remove the black skin from my body. Like, why can't I look like my friends, or why can't my hair be straight, kind of thing. So, do you know what? Even if there isn't the racism aspect, there's that whole, they're not seeing children who look like them. They might not be seeing people in leadership like their teachers who look like them. So that really affects their self-worth. And so if there isn't a lot of work being done at home to kind of build up the child's self-esteem. And at school. And at school is very important, you know, and for them to be very aware and proud of their culture and their background. It could really affect the child massively. So and that's not even, you know, and then there's a racism as well.
And consequently affect the parents. It's like a double whammy, as it were. For us, because we're talking about this, we're dealing with this ourselves in that we were fortunate in that I think, George Floyd, the whole episode and so on, it opened up very interesting conversations at our school where our kids go.
They've started schools, and it's just what has been done.
Well, we're speaking for ourselves because we can't speak for all schools because we don't know about all schools. But for the school we go to specifically, they've started to change things in that they're having conversations, the curriculum, even the books. Like we're starting to see different kinds of books written by authors from backgrounds that we are familiar with, African backgrounds and Asian backgrounds and so on. And more specifically, the conversations are being had, Okay, so let's speak directly to the question, should you send your child to private school? First of all, is to consider why. Very strongly consider why you want to send your child to private school. Don't do it because it's a culturally accepted thing, because your friends are doing it, or because there's some peer pressure. Don't even do it because you see Ken and Mary are doing it for primary school education for their children and then doing something else for secondary school. Like, you have to do what matters for you, and that's very important.
Absolutely. Okay, so point number 2 is to consider the exact needs of your child. And so if your child may be not very academic, or you might decide to send them to private school like halfway through their education, do you feel that they will actually be able to fit in? Because children in private school, they have been pushed and they're generally more, I'd say, advanced. And so will your child thrive in the school, or will their confidence be knocked down because they're now, in a classroom full of really bright kids and now they're struggling to keep up? And
just to add to that, not saying that kids in state schools are not bright, we're just saying that, if you have a child who's going to a state school already and they suddenly go and join a private school, sort of kind of midway through their educational journey, that can prove to be challenging. So I think that's the point Mary's making.
Yeah, exactly.
Thirdly, would say consider very strongly the opportunity cost of sending your child to private school. So for example, are you saving for your retirement? If you're not, then that's a problem. You shouldn't not be saving for retirement just to do private education. Consider a lot about yourself, i.e. what are you trying to achieve for your life outcomes. For example, we teach you how to become financially independent on this channel. Is that something you're aiming for? Of course, it's a real cost. You should really, really, really consider that opportunity cost. Not saying you shouldn't do, go and pay for private education. I'm just saying really, really consider what it's truly costing you beyond the money that's leaving your bank account every month.
Okay, so we had to touch on this being Black people ourselves, but consider the race dynamics. Yeah. So if your child is in a school with predominantly white children, not saying that this is a problem, but there does need to be a balance. So do they have any Black friends outside of school?
Yes.
Do they have people around them that look like them, that reminds them that actually there are successful role models that they could look up to? Yeah, that cultural dimension is very important for you to consider.
And then final consideration, if you must do private, consider doing it somewhere cheaper.
Yes.
For example, you don't have to do it in and around London. We don't live in London, so our fees are a bit cheaper for that reason. But consider somewhere even cheaper, potentially if you're going to do it. Just wanted to raise that particular point. Now, with all of that said, is there an alternative view? Okay, particularly in light of COVID, with the last 18 to 24 months thereabouts, a lot of us have been at home. We've all had to get accustomed to homeschooling. If we had to start all this again, would we do it in a different way?
Yeah, so a lot of parents have said that having to homeschool their children, they notice how much their child developed so much being at home. And so a lot of parents have actually decided to continue that and homeschool their children. And even before COVID, a lot of parents have chosen to homeschool their children. So that is an option.
I personally can't homeschool. I mean, it was hard work.
Did you even do it?
Of course I did. But it was hard work, man. I'm not going to lie. It was just hard work. So I think homeschooling is for a particular kind of person. But I do think there's a growing trend towards more people prioritizing homeschooling. Yeah. But that comes again as an opportunity cost with that, because you have to factor in time, time away from work, and are you a single parent, and you're in a relationship. There's just so much more to it. But it is an option. Scholarships, that's becoming more of a thing. More people get into fee-paying schools by not paying very much at all. So if you're somebody who perhaps does not think they might explore private education, what if your child was that brilliant and they got a scholarship into a school, maybe for an academic scholarship or a musical scholarship? and so on.
So another alternative is growing amounts of information that's available on the internet for free. But like the point that we made at the start, it's not really fair when you look at the people who are hired in senior positions. The culture definitely does need to change around the people who are being hired for certain jobs, for example. Okay, so in conclusion, in the ideal world, we don't really want to be paying for private education, but like the point we made, we plan to send our children to a state secondary school, via the grammar schools. Ideally, if they get in.
Essentially what we're saying here is that what we really want is a levelling up of state education. We want the quality of state education to be much better.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to, you definitely don't want to be paying, as you said. What we want is better quality education, but as things stand, in some areas you have really good quality state education, in quite a lot of areas you don't. What we really need is a better quality of education at primary and secondary level education, such that people don't have to pay. Like many other Scandinavian countries, you get a better quality of education all through, instead of having to pay at certain stages.
Absolutely. And in addition to this, it's all about being led by the needs of the child.
Yeah.
So working closely with them at home, spending quality time with them, getting to know what they're doing at school.
Yeah. Or doing entrepreneurial activities at home.
Exactly.
Anything that means that they're acquiring new skills.
Absolutely.
So in short, it doesn't have to be private education, is what we're saying.
Long or short.
Guys, thank you so much for watching today's video. We hope you really enjoyed it. We'd love to hear from you guys in the comments. Jump in there. Let us know your views. What aspects of today's video really resonated with you? Jump in there and let us know.
Yes, and if you went to a private school as well, we'd love to hear from you. What was your experience?
Yes.
Good or bad? Let us know. It would be great to hear. And did you thrive in a state school? Let us know your experience too.
And as ever, in all things,
Be thankful and seek joy. Take care, guys.
Bye.